Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for coming. I would, first of all, I want to thank the Uxbridge Elderly Connection. Our new sound system was installed on Monday. It is so much better than what we had previously, so we thank our friends group for that. I want to introduce Caitlyn Coyle. Oh, okay. Kathy Burnes is here, and Michelle Putnam from UMass Gerontology Institute. They have been very instrumental in putting this, the Community Needs Assessment, Aging in Uxbridge, putting this data all together for you and doing this presentation today. Caitlyn Coyle is here. Thank you, Caitlyn. So you're going to hear from them shortly. I just want to let you know that the March newsletter is out in the mail. So if you receive that by mail, you should be getting it shortly. If you do not get that and you'd like a copy, there's one at the desk on your way out. Feel free to grab one. Sally, do you have anything?
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi, Sally is our activities coordinator.
Let's see. The next craft we have a makeup craft that I am changing from Valentine's Day to St. Patrick's Day or Easter. Mary, I'll let you know.
Okay.
It's the wreath. We're going to change it because it's now past Valentine's Day, so we're going to redo it into an Easter or St. Patrick's.
Okay.
Otherwise, we're going to be doing the gnomes. My favorite thing in the world is gnomes, so we will be making gnomes very shortly. I already said.
Okay. Great. So sign-ups are on the board for that. Pat.
No, I was just saying though, in the survey, I think the seniors wanted the meatloaf to stay.
Pat's famous meatloaf is today. Thank you, Pat. I know it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to do that. We do appreciate everything you do. All right, let's do a moment of silence before lunch. Thank you. Enjoy your lunch. I want to thank Barry Giles for the cable, putting this on the cable TV. Thank you, Barry, for all you do.
We go, Barry.
Yeah. And welcome Steve Setti, our town manager, who's here as well. Enjoy your lunch.
If at any time my voice gets too soft for anyone, shout out or raise your hand and I'll speak up, okay?
Bye, guys.
So we're so excited to be here with you this afternoon to share the results of the Community Needs Assessment project that we have been working on for at least the past year. So today I'm going to sort of hit the highlights of that needs assessment report. Before I do that, I want to thank a few people. Most importantly, perhaps to me anyway, I want to thank Kathy Burnes, who is here with us this afternoon. Some of you may have interacted with her throughout this process, but we absolutely would not have been able to do it without her. I also want to thank Lisa Bernard for her leadership the whole way through and her patience with us. Also the Council on Aging, the board members, particularly Gail, thank you for your support, and the town of Uxbridge for its support of this project. And to all of you, both here in the room and who might be watching elsewhere, the residents, the stakeholders, people who took the time to participate in a focus group, be interviewed, or complete the survey. Does anybody in here remember taking the survey, getting it in the mail? Show of hands. So thank you all. This work is really only as useful as the data we get, right? So what I'm going to be sharing with you today are the results of this data collection effort, but it is the strength of the work is because people like you participated and told us about your experiences. So why did we do this project? Essentially, there were three primary motivating factors. One is that there's a desire to live and to age in Uxbridge. People have lived here for long periods of time, or they come here and they want to stay. We know that the population of older residents of Uxbridge is significant in terms of proportion of the whole community, but also that it's expected to continue that way and to grow. And that's because people are living longer, people are staying in their communities longer, and those are all good things. So we've got a significant share of the population here already and expecting to continue to stay and be large. And that we know, here in the United States, we talk about older adults, we think about people 60 plus. So when we think about that age group, there's really almost 5 generations of people who are age 60 and older. We're talking people from 60 to 100. I saw in the newsletter someone's turning 103 here in Uxbridge. So that is a lot of, so multiple generations, lots of different life experiences, lots of different preferences, lots of different circumstances, which translates to a wide variety of needs and preferences for programming and services. And so because of those things, the town of Uxbridge said, let's do a needs assessment. Let's engage our residents, learn about what their experiences are, learn about who they are, what they want, what they need, and use that information to inform the Uxbridge Senior Center, the Council on Aging, in terms of its plans for future programming and services, to do some strategic planning around how to meet the ongoing needs of older residents of Uxbridge, and to inform other departments and other organizations in and around Uxbridge that serve residents. One of the things that was important to us when we started this work is to recognize that aging doesn't just happen here at the Senior Center. It happens in our communities and in our neighborhoods and where we live, and it affects things like housing and transportation and economic security, lots of things beyond just the programming and services that happen here at the Senior Center. So we wanted to hear about that. And part of that is hopefully to inform the way that the Senior Center collaborates with other departments and works together as well. So what did we do? We did a demographic profile of the town of Uxbridge. This comes from the American Community Survey, which is a product of the US Census Bureau. It's a representative sample of estimates of the population and allows us to ask questions about all households, all residents of Uxbridge, related to things like health and disability, household income, living arrangements, etc. So we did that. We did a series of key informant interviews, one-on-one conversations with leaders in the community that included first responders, elected officials, planning professionals, and staff of the Senior Center. We did 3 focus groups, including older residents of Uxbridge and community stakeholders. One of the things that's always challenging about this work is that we hear from people who are willing to be heard from, and we know there are people in our communities who are isolated for whatever reasons, and so if we can't engage them directly, we try to do the next best thing, which is to engage the people that they may have interactions with, including faith community leaders, sometimes lawyers or real estate agents, people who are sort of the eyes and the ears of the community who can speak to some of the more vulnerable segments of the people living here. And then we did a community survey, which we received 1,240 surveys back to us, which is a 25% response rate, which is very, very good. And so the data that we'll be presenting to you today will be sort of a triangulation of all of these things. But I just want to sort of pause for a second and reiterate my appreciation for the 1,240 people in Uxbridge who did take the time to return our survey.
Thank you.
So just a little bit more about who we heard from. This is comparing the age distribution of the survey respondents to the age distribution of the whole population of Uxbridge. So you'll see that we have, in our survey responses, about 10% of our survey responses came from people 55 to 59. That's compared to 19% of the population 55 plus in Uxbridge. So we have an underrepresentation of people 55 to 59. So when we're looking at the data, it's just important to know that the proportions are slightly underrepresented of people in their 50s. In our survey, we heard from 36% of people in their 60s. That's compared to 44% in the broader population. So again, a slight underrepresentation, but not too bad. We have, and people in their 70s, we have a slight overrepresentation. So our population, our sample is 36% people in their 70s, compared to 23% of people in the broader community. And again, for people 80 plus, 18% of our survey respondents reported being 80 or older. compared to 14%. So generally, you know, similar pattern, but slight underrepresentation of people in their 50s and 60s. And so that's just important as we think about interpreting the results with respect to their representativeness. Mostly we heard from females, 59% female versus 41% male. Not unexpected. We know surveys are more likely to be completed by people who identify as female. Okay, so moving into some of the results of the survey, we asked people about how long they've lived in Uxbridge. That's the pie chart that you see here. And what you can see is that we have the majority of people have been here for more than 15 years, including 17% who've been here for 37% of people who've been here for 35 years or more, and including 20% of people who've been here for between 5 and 14 years. So we got a little bit of diversity with respect to people who've been here for a really long time, which is the majority of our survey respondents, but we do have smaller shares of people who've been here, so 9% of people who said they've been here for fewer than 5 years. And so we do have some diversity with respect to how long people have been in the community. We also asked them how important it is for them to stay in Uxbridge. That's this bar graph that you see here. And I think what's important to realize, to recognize from this is that as people get older, as the age goes up, so does the importance of staying in Uxbridge. So you see that for people, more than half of respondents in their 70s and 64% of people in their 80s say it is very important for them to stay. And we see smaller shares of that in the younger age groups. So a little bit, drawing from the demographic profile here, this is showing you the age distribution of the town of Uxbridge, starting with the 2010 decennial census, and it includes the 2020 decennial census, and it includes projections that are developed by the UMass Boston Institute for the years 2030 and 2040. So that light blue section of the figure, those are people aged 60 to 79 in Uxbridge. And the orange at the top, or yellow, whatever we want to call that color, at the top is the people 80 plus in Uxbridge. So you see that between 2010 and 2020, we went from about 18%, 60 plus in Uxbridge to 26% of the community identifying as an older adult. So a big jump there. When we're looking to the projections, we see that 34% in 2030 are expected to be age 60 and older. And looking out to the year 2040, we see even more people by then being age 60 and older, so about 36% by 2040. So going back to the rationale for this work, part of that is that you've got expected to be about a third of your community being identifying as an older resident in the near future. In the survey, one of the first things we asked people was about what do they value about living in Uxbridge. We had a lot of responses, more than 1,000 responses. All of those were reviewed, categorized, and counted. And what I'm showing you here are the top 3 things that people described in their own words about valuing characteristics of the community. So number 1 was this idea of having the small town feeling, but also having proximity to amenities and outdoor spaces. So this idea that it sort of has a small town feel, but you can get what you need without going too far. Number 2 were the people. So being near friends and family, number 2. And number 3 is the safety of Uxbridge as a community. And the bubbles that you see around here are direct quotes from residents who wrote in and sort of described some of these concepts. So I'll just read 1 or 2 of them for you. For example, one says that they like the niceties of living in a small town and being near family, but close to big cities, hospitals, healthcare, shopping, and entertainment. So sort of the best of both worlds in some cases. People also talk about people essentially look out for one another in Uxbridge, so there was a sense of community. Sorry. Similarly, we asked about what concerns people about their ability to age in Uxbridge. So the same process was taken where we reviewed all of these write-in comments, categorized them, counted them, and the top 3 that you see here, number 1, and probably not surprising to most of you, is cost of living, specifically taxes, so being able to afford staying in Uxbridge as they get older. Number 2 was the lack of downsizing options and need for home maintenance so housing, but more specifically, if there's no housing downsizing options and I have to stay in my home, I also have to make modifications or adjustments to my home so that I can age there safely. And then number 3 was maintaining mobility and access to transportation. So this is about having access to transportation, but more specifically, people described their ability to get around however that is, in whatever capacity. So it includes maintaining their physical mobility, but also being able to access the transportation that does exist in and around the community. So again, some direct quotes from people. So someone says, getting around if I'm not able to drive. People talk about the size of the cost of living, so being able to, rising costs of rent, not enough availability of senior housing, etc. People are talking about associating the cost of living with needing to leave Uxbridge potentially in the future. So taking that piece about economic security, sort of financial resources, this shows you the median household income in Uxbridge as of the 2023 estimates from the American Community Survey. The bottom bar shows you the proportion of folks age 65 plus in the various income brackets compared to people 45 to 64. So this light blue, well, 2 things I'll say. The first thing that I see when I look at this is that there is just a lot more socioeconomic diversity among older residents of Uxbridge compared to people 45 to 64. We see, for example, 18% of older adults in Uxbridge are living on less than $25,000 a year, and that's compared to just 4% of people who are 45 to 64. So older adults are just living on less, which part of that is inherent. We might assume that if they're no longer working and relying on retirement income, but nonetheless, I think really important to remind ourselves of that situation for a lot of older adults in Uxbridge. On the survey, we asked whether or not people believe they have enough resources to meet their basic needs. And 13%, which is about 130 people, said no. They don't believe they have adequate resources to meet their needs at this time. Another way of looking at, sort of at the financial security aspect of it is looking at the amount of money that people spend on housing per month. And so this shows you the renters versus homeowners, age 65 and older in Uxbridge. 37% of owners say that they spend at least 30% of their income on housing. But in renters, that jumps to 53%. So half of older renters in Uxbridge are what we call sort of housing cost burdened by their housing. They're spending a significant share of their monthly income on housing, and that means that they have less left over for everything else that we need to get by. One of the questions on the survey was about food security and whether or not people are worried about running out of food before they get money to buy more. And when we look at what I'm showing you here is the difference between people who say, I have what I need to get by, compared to that 13% of people who say, I don't have what I need to get by. For people who report being sort of what I'm calling financially insecure, 27% say that was often or sometimes true for them in the last year. So in the last year, they did worry about running out of food before they had money to buy more, compared to people who responded that they didn't have that financial worry, where we see less than 1% or about 1% of people are in that situation. So again, when we think about food access, really distinguishing between people who have sort of those financial resources and those who don't. We asked in housing about home repair and home modification. So I mentioned in those write-ins people talking about the sort of being able to stay in their homes safely. So we asked them, does your current home need a repair? So the examples we gave were things like new windows or replacing a heating system.
Always needs a repair.
I know. And what we see is that most people say, no, my current resident does not need repair, so 66% say no. But actually 30% of the sample, actually 34% of the sample say, yes, my home needs a repair. So 34% of people said, yes, my home needs a repair. Among them, 18%, so about half of people who need a repair say, I need it and I cannot afford to make the repair. So the cost is the burden there. And 12% of people say, of those people who need a home repair, say, I need it and I can afford it. We asked a similar question about modifications, and so this is slightly different. It means, sort of something a little more proactive, thinking about the examples we gave were ramps or grab bars and showers. We saw a very similar pattern where 35% of people say, yes, my home needs some kind of modification. And of that 35%, 12% say, I need it, but I can't afford to make it. I will say that 20% of those people say, yes, I need this repair or this modification, and I can afford it. And I always think about those people in terms of, okay, if I need it and I have the money to do it, why haven't I done it? And so I think, when I think about that, I think about knowing where to start, knowing who to help, who could help, who to trust, all of those kinds of things. And so I think those are places where we can think about the Senior Center and the Council on Aging potentially connecting people with resources. This is a busy slide, I recognize, but we asked people about their housing preferences. So we assume people want to stay where they are. So we prompt them by saying, if you had to move in the next 5 years from your current home, what kind of housing would you like to live in here in Uxbridge? And we see some age differences, which is what I'm gonna sort of call out. So the people in their 50s and 60s, their number one choice is to have a smaller single family home, is what they're looking for. For people in their 70s and 80s, they're actually looking for affordable housing, including sort of coming in second for people in their 70s is 55 plus independent living. And for people in their 80s, they're also interested in assisted living. That's interesting to me. So people are looking for affordable, especially in the 70s and 80s, looking for affordable housing and housing with supports. Another part of the survey was about transportation. We asked people about their current driving status. What we see, we have three categories. People who say, I don't drive at all. People who say, I drive, but I limit my driving. So maybe I don't drive at night, or I stay in town, avoid highways, etc. And then people who drive with no limitations. What you see in this area graph here is that as people age, about 19% of people in their 70s, for example, say they either don't drive at all or drive with some limitations. So 14% of people say I limit my driving in some way, and 5% of people say that they don't drive at all. Among people 80 plus, 18% of our survey respondents report not driving at all. And 28% say they limit their driving in some way. And so we know the transportation resources that come out of this place are very important to people who are in some of these categories. Among people so we looked at whether or not someone had to miss, cancel, or reschedule a medical appointment in the last year because of transportation. And you can see that there's differences based on driving status. So 27% of non-drivers say, yes, that has happened to me in the last year. For people who limit their driving, 12% say, yes, I've had to miss, cancel, or reschedule a medical appointment. For people who drive with no trouble, only 2% have had that experience.
Thank you.
So, thinking about caregiving, we asked about whether or not people are now currently or in recent years providing care to someone who is frail or disabled. We see some age differences, including more than half of people in their 50s and 60s say yes, they are providing care or have recently provided care to someone who is frail or disabled. So when we think about what the younger seniors, people in their 50s and 60s, a lot of them are involved in some form of caregiving. We asked them about what kind of condition the person has that requires them to provide this care. Number one was mobility impairment, so just sort of physical mobility challenges is the reason they're providing care. About 52% say that that's the reason. Number two is chronic disease, so things like diabetes, arthritis, or heart disease. 32% of caregivers are caring for someone with those conditions. 29% of people are caregiving for someone with Alzheimer's or related dementia. And similarly, 28% are caring for someone with a psychological condition like anxiety or depression. So these folks have a lot going on. Many of the people in these age groups are also still working, and they have a variety of needs when it comes to what the kind of person that they're caring for. We asked them about how difficult it was to do this work and how it's affected their lives. So this is among caregivers. 34% say that their social life has deteriorated because of their care provision. And 30% say that their mental health has deteriorated because of this role of caregiving. So people are, it's not always an easy experience to provide that care. We wanted to know how, we tried to get a sense of the risk of isolation. So we asked about how frequently people connect with others in ways like sending email, talking on the phone, or getting together in person. And what I want to draw your attention to is that this getting together in person, we see that 46% of survey respondents say they get together on a weekly basis with someone in person, but actually, I want to draw your attention, this 13% of people say that they get together in person with someone once a month or less. So that's compared to 9% of people who say I talk on the phone or FaceTime with someone, or 14% who send email. So 13% of adults in our sample say that they get together physically in person once a month or less, which I sort of think about as sort of at risk of isolation in terms of that physical getting together with someone. We asked, do you know someone within 30 minutes of your home whom you could rely on for help if you needed it? And we saw some age differences. By and large, people said yes to this question, but for people in their 50s, we saw that 14% of them said no. I don't have someone I could call if I needed help. We had a nice even split here when we asked about whether or not people believe that local policymakers take into account the interests and concerns of older residents. So it was really split. We've got 36% say they disagree with that statement, and they don't feel like older adults are taken into consideration. 33% do agree with that, and 31% say I don't know to that question. All right, getting to the Senior Center here. We asked about, have you ever been to the Council on Aging? So you'll remember that we mailed these surveys out to people, whether they've been here or not. It went to their home address. So the line graph there shows you rates of participation by age. So people in their 50s, 3% have been here before. And that continues, that rises with age up to 46% of people in their 80s who said that they've been to the Senior Center. When we ask them how frequently they come, among people who say, yes, I've been there before, most of them, 64% of them, say that they come a few times a year for special events only. But we see that about 20% of people come at least once a week or multiple times a week. So it's always interesting to me to just sort of think about the different relationships people have with the Senior Center. Some people come once a year, there are some people who are here multiple times a week, and then there's about 15% who say they come once a month or a couple of times a month. And so really a variety of interactions with the Senior Center. We asked, so I actually split the sample into two groups. One group, which is the dark blue bar, are people who said they have never been here. And the light blue bar are people who have been here, even if they've only come once or twice. And we asked them about what limits their ability to participate here. For people who have never been here before, the number one thing that prevents them from coming is that they are still working. 27% are still working. 35% say they don't know what is offered, so that's actually number one. The number one reason that keeps people who've never been here from coming is that they don't know what is offered, followed by they are still working, and also followed by I do not need the services that are offered. Among users, so people who have been here before, the number one thing that keeps them from coming more often is that they don't need the services offered. So there's a perception that you have to have a need to come here. And for those of us who do come, we know you don't have to have a need, you just have to have a desire to come. But there is a perception that you have to have a need to come to the Senior Center, which I think is an interesting thing to consider. We asked them similarly, what would get them to come? What would make you more likely to come to the Senior Center? Again, looking at users versus non-users. For people who have never come to the Senior Center, if they had more knowledge about the programs and services that are offered, they would come. So again, information. For current users, people who do participate, they would be more likely to come if there was more parking. And as well, so coming in second for people who are current users, they would also come more often if programs and services were better suited to their interests and if the space could accommodate more people. So I heard there was a wait list for lunch today, and so this idea of if they knew they could come and park easily and have a spot to participate, they would be more likely to come. We asked about what kind of service, so we split services and programs into two separate questions, and we asked about what kinds of services would you like to expand at the Senior Center in the future. And again, I'm comparing people who've been here versus people who've never been here, and I'm showing you sort of the top 5 of each of those groups. So for people who currently use the Senior Center, the number one thing they would like to see more of is transportation to medical appointments. Now, this isn't to say that doesn't already exist, it's to say they want more of it, or to expand it. Number 2 is professional services, so tax preparation, legal or financial advice. And number 3, there was a tie between durable medical equipment loan and on-site meals and cafe services, coming in 3rd. Coming in 4th was grab-and-go meals and in-home programs, so help at home. For people who've never been here, the service that they would like more of is professional services, so that sort of tax prep, legal, financial, they want access to some of those professional services. But number 2 was also transportation to medical appointments. Number 3 is health insurance counseling. Number 4 is grab-and-go meals, and number 5 is in-home programs. So there's some overlap with respect to what people are looking for, but a little bit of a difference with non-users really looking for some of those professional, health insurance, tax advice, etc. But both groups wanting transportation specifically to medical appointments. We asked the same question about programs. This was interesting to me. Number 1, either users or non-users, the number one thing they want more of is day trips. 44% of users and 40% of non-users say they would like to see more day trips at the Senior Center. For current users, they also would like performances, presentations, and lectures. That came in 2nd. And for non-users, outdoor exercise and indoor exercise came in 2nd and 3rd. But non-users would also like performances and presentations, so there is also some overlap between the two groups. But certainly, day trips rose to the top here. So we asked if a multi-generational community center was developed in Uxbridge, how likely would you or members of your household be to use that facility? This is presented by age. So what we see is the orange and blue at the bottom there are people, those are people who said I would be very likely or somewhat likely to use a multi-generational community center. So, and then the people in the gray are people who say they are unsure, so they don't know. And the gold yellow bar at the top is people who say they are somewhat unlikely or very unlikely to use a multi-generational community center. So we see that the younger folks, people in their 50s and 60s, close to more than half or about half of them said they would be very likely or somewhat likely to participate in a multi-generational community center. And we see that sort of drops a little bit in the older age groups. But overall, there are, of all ages, across all ages, looking about 40% of people are saying, I would be very likely or somewhat likely to participate. And 17% overall say they would be unlikely to participate. And a big chunk, 38% say they are unsure at this time. So I think ongoing conversations about that topic are needed, but it's good to get a sort of a sense of where to start. We also asked about the potential arrangements for a future senior center or multi-generational community center. So there were 3 options. Number 1 was that programs and services would be held in a dedicated space, but within a shared building. So they would share the building with other community services, but the senior center would have dedicated space. The second would be that programs and services are held in a different building altogether, so a dedicated senior center, standalone type of senior center. And the third was that programs and services continue to be held here at this location. And I apologize that my labels didn't transfer over here, but we see that the most preference was for the first option, which is for programs and services being held in dedicated space within a shared building with other community services. But it was close between that and a standalone senior center. And you do see shares of people in both of those, all 3 of these categories who say that they don't know. So again, I think a lot of uncommitted people out there, but certainly the most preferred was to be in a shared building but with dedicated space. Lastly, we asked about how people get information. So we asked about, do you know someone, or do you know who to contact in the community should you or someone in your family need help, specifically accessing social or municipal services? A lot of people don't know, is the takeaway here. 67% of people in their 50s, 63% of people in their 60s, about half of people in their 70s and 80s say, no, I don't know who to contact in Uxbridge if me or someone in my family needed help. We asked about their preferred sources of information. The local newspaper is sort of consistently preferred across age groups. We do see some preference for the Uxbridge Senior Center newsletter, specifically the print version for people in their 80s. We do see some significant age differences in terms of social media, so people in their 50s, 60s being more likely to use social media than younger or older cohorts. And the other one that was consistent across age groups is word of mouth, which I think is also worth noting in terms of people are motivated to get information from other residents. So, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy, who is going to wrap us up with a couple of ideas for recommendations. And then we'll be happy to take questions.
So, hello to the people I've met in the past, and thank you again to Lisa for your collaboration. It was wonderful. I heard so many great things about the Senior Center and about the work being done here, both in terms of services and programs. And I should say that several people said that they felt like this is an undervalued resource for all the things that it provides the town. So I'll start by saying that, and I just want to give headlines here so that we can get into questions and answers. But based on everything that we looked at, all the data, we tried to do some recommendations, key findings and recommendations. And I encourage you all, I hope the report will be available to you so you can really dive into it and read some of this stuff, because it's really interesting. All the interviews and the focus groups, quotes from people. So it's no names, but it's really interesting stuff and I think very useful. So based on what we learned, number one, And there's, you've heard the top 10, this is the top 8. So we want to increase awareness of programs and services available. You definitely heard that. And there's a lot of ways that that can be done. 2, residents want programs that stimulate them physically, mentally, and intellectually. Lots of avenues for that. We make suggestions. Most of the suggestions we make are what we call low-hanging fruit. We don't try to solve the big problems, but we make recommendations that have a lot to do with education, and information. 3, consider future capacity needs of the Uxbridge Senior Center. We have worked with other organizations, other senior centers that have gone through a process of building or enhancing a space that they have, and that's clearly something that we hope that a committee can get together and start working on thinking about the future of space for this center. Caregiving is common and families need support. I thought it was so interesting that the largest caregiving population, it's not surprising, but it's important to know, is the people who are ages 55 to 69. And these are people who we call the sandwich generation. So they're taking care of their own children and they're taking care of their parents. And so there's a lot of room for education and support. Obtaining supplementary and accessible transportation is a concern for some residents as they age. We already heard that. Let's really support the services here, which are so important, and advocate for increased funding and resources to keep people being able to go to their medical appointments in other places. But also there's room there to do some education around other aspects of transportation. Financial security, taxes, water, sewer rates, room for a lot of education and gathering so that you can learn about resources that exist. We have in Uxbridge financial support programs for folks that people need to know about and that could hopefully be expanded in terms of eligibility. Homeowners, we talked about the whole issue of maintenance and repairs. Lots of opportunity, again, for using the senior center as a place where people can learn about resources. I didn't mention, but it's true that because of the interests that people have and the wide age range of people who can and want to use services here, that evening and weekend activities are strongly recommended to do some pilot programming, perhaps around education for the kinds of issues that we're talking about. Facilitating connection and information are both areas for intervention. Some people said, as newcomers, they don't feel welcome because they're newcomers and people have lived here for years and years and years. So maybe there's some things that can be done in that welcoming new people to the town. Also, we saw that people are interested and needing technology training to better access how to be safe online, how to access healthcare, those kinds of things. And cable came up many times. I don't know, turning people on to what you are doing and doing more of it, helping people learn about the political candidates come back here to the senior center, and so people can ask questions and learn about those issues, and then figure out a way that people can know that this information is on YouTube and available to them. So lots of very specific recommendations, and we encourage you to look at the report in its many pages of important information.
Thank you, Kathy. And thanks everybody for your attention. I see that you made it through dessert, so that's always good. We're happy to spend a few minutes getting reactions from people, taking questions. So if you do have a question or a thought or a reaction, if you want to raise your hand, I'll come to you and we can speak it to the mic. Oh yes, back here.
is there currently a group of people, a committee, who we can go to voice our opinion, whether it be vocally or online or any other way, email?
It's a great question. I believe that, so this is about where a group that exists that you could go to with your feedback, your concerns, your questions. I believe that's the Council on Aging Board, the Board of Directors. Would that be correct, Lisa? Oh, the question was, is there a group that exists that receives feedback and comments and questions from the public?
That would be the council.
The Council on Aging Board.
Okay.
Yep. Any other thoughts, questions, reactions? Yes.
How does one get a copy of the report for those who were unable to attend today?
Great. Lisa will provide that. Send it out. Probably. Well, yeah, we can email it. It is a very long report. We can also share the slides with folks who aren't able to be here as well. Yes.
So, on the people that didn't, like, we're talking about transportation and, you know, meals, let's say, or activities. They didn't know about those apparently.
Yeah.
So what recommendation do you have to get that word out?
Great question. That came up in several ways in the survey in terms of people not feeling like they know what goes on or what's available to them. And I think we saw, a word of mouth, frankly, being a really powerful tool. We saw that kind of across age groups is a way that people get information, and anymore where a lot of us are overwhelmed with the amount of information that's being thrown at us. And so thinking about sort of an ambassador program or a liaison program. I'm sure many of you do this already, where you're telling your friends and your neighbors about what goes on here, inviting them to participate, but thinking about maybe there's some incentives for bringing a new member to the community, et cetera. And then honestly, a lot of it is just continuing to beat the drum. So we already have the newsletter, we have the public cable, we have social media. Lisa and her staff are constantly sharing on those platforms, but it's just kind of an ongoing effort that I think needs to be.
Okay.
We also make a suggestion in one of the recommendations that that we have a cable show that's called Did You Know?
Yes, cable show.
You know, to sort of try some new avenues for giving people information about, and or written sort of one-pagers on the website, town website, and that can be handed out to people about key resources, you know,
Yeah.
things that
Have
are
you
not.
ever scrolled through your TV and with all the channels?
It's hard.
It's like, great.
Right.
It's like,
How do you even figure out?
One little channel.
Well, and I think, yes.
You have to point people to YouTube, to the link to YouTube. You know,
Oh,
you sort of have to
okay.
kind of rethink how you tell people.
Right,
You don't say go to this
Facebook,
cable.
Uniquely Uxbridge is a good source.
Yeah, and trying to come up with some short clips of experiences. So a regular cable show is one. We will be looking for a host of that if anyone is interested in pursuing a second career in journalism. I think you're a great candidate for that. And I think to Kathy's point, this idea of what we did hear and see is that there are, across age groups, very differing issues that mean important things to different people. So thinking about people in their 50s and 60s who are working and providing care both to children and to their aging family members and friends, what's going to motivate them to participate is maybe different than somebody who is an 80-year-old person who's living alone in a rental apartment kind of thing. And so thinking about what are we messaging and to whom, and maybe thinking about some more targeted approaches to those different groups in terms of what is going to get their attention. All right. Well, I thank you so much for having me. Thank you for lunch. I will be sticking around if you have questions or comments. Thanks again to Lisa. We couldn't have done this without you. I look forward to keeping up with what's going on in Uxbridge. We are a partner to you, so call us if you need anything. All right, take care, everybody.